I was a wartime general. Now I'm a wartime president.
Your inner circle's been compromised. Let me fix it.
Watch yourself. You're not Steve Rogers.
You're right. I'm not.
Hello there, everyone, and welcome to a bonus episode of the Overcast. I'm by myself today, it's just Oversoul, and I'm going to be doing a discussion and review for Captain America: Brave New World. It's the most latest entry in the MCU, besides the Daredevil show that just started at the time of recording this. Now, as I said, I am by myself, and the reason for that is that my co-hosts, Nick and Brooksy, have not seen this movie yet. I know at least one of them does intend on eventually watching it, but jury's out on the other one. Just to be clear, though, my co-hosts are genuinely good, forward-thinking people, so I can assure you that Sam Wilson, a black man, being Captain America now, is definitely not the reason that they haven't seen it. Neither one of them are like that. In fact, the three of us on this very podcast quite often mock the type of ignorant people that would pass up on a movie for simply having a black protagonist. Trust me, I wouldn't associate with either of them if they were like that. Yeah, in Brooksy's case, he just didn't feel like going to the theaters for this one and is waiting for it to come out on streaming. And in Nick's case, well, Nick is what we call a fair weather fan when it comes to the MCU. He tends to pretty much only watch the really big things like Avengers and Spider-Man for the most part, or the ones that specifically catch his interest. Although, in all fairness, he did check out the Marvels, so, and I did tell him that this one was really good and felt like an original MCU movie, like the classic ones that we grew up with, so hopefully he'll give it a chance out of good faith. But I'm not waiting around for the two of them to wait for this to come out on streaming to watch it before talking about it. I did a double feature at the movie theaters recently. I saw this and a horror movie that I'll talk about later in some other fashion. But I had to get this off my chest. I had to talk about this movie. And I wanted to get on it while the getting's still good. So, even though by myself, as usual, we're going to follow the same formula. It'll be a spoiler-free discussion at first, followed by a rating, and then we'll transfer over to the spoilers with a warning so you can click off if you don't want to hear them. So, this movie continues elements of, first of all, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, the Disney Plus show, is probably the most important thing that it's directly playing off of. That show introduced us to Sam's new sidekick, Juarez, I want to say his name is, who is basically the new Falcon, because Sam is the new Cap. Hey everyone, future editing Oversoul here to pop in really quickly to just say I mistakenly referred to this character as Juarez because I was mixing up his first name and his last name. His name is Joaquin Torres. So I am going to continue mistakenly referring to him as Juarez throughout the rest of this podcast, so just bear with me and know that his name is actually Torres. Torres, Torres, Torres. I just had to make sure I fixed that in post. The show also went to great lengths to talk about why Sam was the right choice for the Shield and why Bucky wasn't, and it really drives home the point that Bucky himself didn't want it. So that's the biggest thing. This movie is more or less a direct continuation of that, but it also ties into a few other things, like Eternals. There have been a few things here and there, like a newsreel and She-Hulk and stuff, that, like, kind of drew attention to the fact that there is a dead giant celestial in the, or a giant dead celestial in the Indian Ocean due to the events of the Eternals movie, but it hasn't really been, they just kind of swept it under the rug for a while until recently. In this movie, they finally acknowledge it, and it actually becomes a pretty big plot point, which we will get into in the spoilers. But also, this movie continues the original Edward Norton Hulk movie that was like the second MCU movie right after Iron Man. That was back when Samuel L. Jackson as Nick Fury was showing up at the end of every movie to recruit people. Except the original Hulk movie's credit scene actually had Iron Man show up, and I think he wanted to recruit Abomination originally, and then they ended up working it out where he could get the Hulk instead for the Avengers. But who he met with was Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, which in the original Hulk movie, the one with Edward Norton before they replaced him with Mark Ruffalo in the MCU, that Liv Tyler, Betty Ross, Thaddeus Ross was her father, and he was kind of like the main antagonist of that movie. He was the angry general that kept going after him. That same guy, though, at that point he was played by William Hurt, and he continued to play Thunderbolt Ross throughout the rest of the MCU, including Avengers Captain America Civil War, that's the one, god damn it, Civil War and Endgame, both in particular, are big deals for this, because Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross is the one who started the Sokovia Accords, and then he was the one who hunted down the rogue Avengers, when the ones that didn't agree to it, and he's the one that's still hunting them down at the beginning of Endgame. So anyways, the original actor who played him, William Hurt, passed away. So in this new Captain America movie, that character is in this movie, but he's now being played by a new actor, Harrison Ford. Yeah, none other than the Harrison Ford, which is something, I really enjoyed. But, and this is not a spoiler because it's in the trailers, even though it shouldn't have been, he becomes the Red Hulk in this movie. But don't get your hopes up too high, because the Hulk stuff really only happens close to the end of the movie. We really only get Red Hulk for like 15 minutes, if even that, of a 2-hour movie. Maybe more like 10 minutes. Pretty big fight scene. So, yeah. But there's a lot of great lead up to that with Harrison Ford himself, and honestly, Harrison Ford has always been really good at playing presidents, and in this movie, he's the president. Yes, that's right. Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross, the same guy who had his hands around the Avengers' neck in previous movies, is now running the country in the MCU. And that definitely has some stipulations. For one thing, in order to, maintain some form of legality, Sam Wilson, aka the new Captain America, is working for the government in this movie. He's working for the military. His sidekick Juarez, is the new Falcon, is an army soldier. So he obviously has some reservations about working for the guy who was literally trying to disassemble the Avengers, 7 movies ago? So, wow, that's crazy. Well, as Ryan George on Pitch Meeting put it, the MCU is the world's most expensive TV show. Even more so now that there's actual TV shows in it. But anyways, I digress. So what we get here is, I will say that they retread some familiar ground from Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Sam, all this time has passed. You'd think he would have figured out in that show. In this movie, he's still struggling with the whole, I can't replace Captain America thing, But there was one really cool part in the trailer where the president told him, "You're not Steve Rogers," and he's like, "You're right, I'm not." And then his fucking wings come out, and it was so cool. But that moment's a little more subdued in the actual movie. But, early in the movie, he seems pretty confident, but then things start to, bad things happen and start to take a turn. And as Sam starts to realize that the shoes he's trying to fill are of a guy who was injected with super soldier serum, something that he doesn't have and didn't take, refused to take, in fact, he starts to realize that as just a normal man with a shield and no superpowers, it's a lot harder for him to protect the people he cares about than it was for Steve Rogers to do, you know? But there's a really good scene in the movie at one point where someone, I won't tell you who, but someone tells him that, I mean, I'll tell you in the spoiler section, but not now. But anyway, someone tells him some words of motivation along the lines of, even with the super soldier serum, Steve still couldn't protect everyone he cared about. He still had failures. He wasn't a god, you know. He fucked up too. And you know, I'm not really sure if that works as words of motivation, though, because when you're telling that to a guy who doesn't have superpowers, you're saying, yeah, people with superpowers mess up all the time. You know, they can't save everyone either. Someone without powers is going to think, oh, good, if people with powers mess up all the time, then surely I'm going to, because I'm lesser than them on account of not having them. You know, but, you know, that maybe that's just me overthinking it. But overall, I enjoyed this movie. The action was really well filmed. You know, I do like I said, I like Sam's struggle here, but it is really just, if you've watched Falcon and the Winter Soldier, this whole movie kind of feels like we've been here, done that. You know, with but with the addition of moving, this movie does move the overall MCU forward. It is one of those ones that if you do skip it, you're going to be missing some super important threads, seeds that are being planted for what's coming next. You know, now, regardless of this being a movie in Phase 5, we're in Phase 5 now. So Phases 1 through 3 was the Infinity Saga, and we're way past that now. Phases 4 through 6 are being known as the Multiverse Saga for obvious reasons. Here's the thing, though. Basically, no multiverse things in this movie at all whatsoever, except for a post-credit scene that kind of warns about. It's more of a hint at the multiverse, which we don't really need hinted because we've already seen it. We know it exists. Literally, the animated show What If is about the multiverse. Every episode of that show takes place in a different universe throughout continuity. We've seen Loki. We've seen the TVA. The TVA is all about multiverses. We've seen Deadpool and Wolverine, which was all about multiverses and included the TVA from Loki. You know, we've seen Multiverse of Madness, which the Doctor Strange movie, which danced with multiverses but didn't fully go there. You know, they started teasing the idea of multiverses in Spider-Man Far From Home, the second one, and WandaVision, but they didn't go all in on it. They were just teases, just little red herrings, little appetizers, and then they pulled the rug out from under us and was like, gotcha, there's no multiverse yet, but it's coming, you know? So they did all that, but I can assure you this is a very self-contained MCU movie that doesn't do any multiversal shenanigans whatsoever. It feels like a classic MCU movie. It feels like something from Phase 1 or 2, but like in the good way, you know? I would say maybe Phase 2, because Phase 2 I think is where a lot of people agree some of the best movies in the whole franchise are. Not all of them. But Phases 2 and 3 were probably top tier MCU. You know, Phase 1 was kind of, they were still finding their origins. And then Phase 4 started off strong and then really went downhill near the end. I mean, I like everything that they've done, personally. You know, I think, I even like the Eternals. You know, if you have a problem with that, you can suck an egg. But, I think maybe the only thing they've done that recently that I thought was kind of disappointing was Secret Invasion. I thought that could have been better. But like the early stages, though, I thought Thor: The Dark World was terrible. I kind of liked Iron Man 3, but I didn't like the Mandarin shit that they did. But I do like that they fixed that in Shang-Chi. So, you know, that's the other thing too. You know, they've been, with some of these newer movies, going back to loose plot threads from previous movies and tying them up. You know, like the Mandarin, like they tie up the Mandarin shit from Iron Man 3 in Shang-Chi, you know, and yes, it's Shang, not Shang. I've watched the movie, so I would know. And I mean, the guy literally corrects people on how to say his name in the movie, you know, and people still get it wrong. Anyways, and then yeah, I forget what some of the other ones are, but I am happy to announce that this movie does that too. They definitely tie up some loose threads from 16 years ago. Yeah. There is a very loose plot thread from the original Hulk movie, The Incredible Hulk, the Edward Norton one, that that gets tied up in this movie. It was basically a not really a post-credit scene, more like a mid-credit scene thing, but we'll talk about that more in the spoilers because it was one of the few things the trailer didn't ruin, you know. So we'll wait to get there, but this did feel like a classic MCU movie, you know, like just in a lot of ways there was a lot of similarities with Captain America Winter Soldier here. It's not as good by any means. Winter Soldier is a solid 10 out of 10 MCU movie. If anything, it's one of the best MCU movies, if not the best MCU movie out there. And yes, I know Infinity War exists. But I'm trying to speak objectively here, though. My personal opinion, it's probably Infinity War. But anyways, though. So, I kind of forgot where I was going with that. Oh, yeah, it's not as good as Winter Soldier, but it's not bad either. It comes close-ish. Like, it's within the ballpark, we'll say, at the very least. Because it really is just a guy in a suit kicking ass against a giant monster and fight and other things, you know, like jet planes and shit as he's flying around with his wings. And, you know, the fight scenes are really well choreographed. I was glad to see that, you know, the fight scenes weren't jump cut to shit in this movie. One of the biggest problems the MCU has always had over time was that the fight scenes were always like so jump cutty. You know, it was always hard to tell what was going on because it was just like, you know, jump cut, shaky cam, jump cut, shaky cam, shaky jump cut cam, shaky jammy jump fuck blah blah blah, you know, Hulk smash. And that's all it was. It was just chaos and destruction left and right, and you could never tell what was happening from one scene to the next in a lot of those fight scenes. But ever since Shang-Chi, it feels like they finally figured out how to do fight scenes correctly, and they've been edited well, and this movie is no exception. Every fight scene in this movie, I could keep up with what was going on easily. I could easily tell, like, I was never confused from one scene to the next. Everything flowed very well. It was very well choreographed. And man, let me tell you, the Wakandans hooked my man Sam up with some vibranium wings, and those motherfuckers do some damage. Holy shit, that shit was crazy. Oh, it was so cool to see. Yeah. Black Panther, also one of the top tier MCU movies, by the way. But seriously, though, I know, it's basically just Lion King retold in live action. Shut the fuck up. It's good. Anyways. Yeah, so overall I did enjoy this movie. I will say the inclusion of Giancarlo Esposito was a little overhyped from the trailers. He plays Sidewinder, a member of the Serpent Society, a group of assassins that name themselves based off different snakes. We saw one of them in, I want to say it was Luke Cage. Was it? Was it Cobra in that, or was it Black Mamba? It was one of them. But there was one of them in, I want to say it was Luke Cage. It was definitely one of the Netflix shows. So, and now we see Sidewinder in this, but he's really not there very much. I do hope he comes back, though. I mean, you don't get an actor that big to only, for like a few scenes in a movie and then you get rid of him. It seems like he's going to become a reoccurring problem down the line. So I'm excited to see where his story goes in the future, but he really, more than anything, was just a plot device to get Captain America from point A to point B. He plays a vital role in the information that they need in order to piece things together, and that's a big part of the overall thing. But their fight was very short lived, and I was a little disappointed. There's a lot of action in this movie, but most of the action, most of the fight scenes are against cannon fodder, regular ass human enemies, not super villains or other heroes. It's just a guy with vibranium wings and a vibranium shield taking down normal ass people, and probably doing the Batman bone breaks. Oh, they'll be fine. They'll live. They're just gonna need a lot of physical therapy before they can walk again. Uh, um, anyways, I didn't kill him. I just broke his spine. He'll be paralyzed from the waist down forever. He's not dead. He's a vegetable. I'm sorry. Oh, that was dumb. Okay. Anyways, this is what happens when I'm left to my own devices to do this shit. I really, I can rein. Apparently, I can only rein myself in when I'm under a time limit and making sure other people have the floor. If it's just me, we're gonna go on a fucking tangent, baby. But seriously, though, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can say about this movie that's not too spoilery. Well, I guess I should explain one thing. Okay, so after Steve Rogers and before Sam Wilson, there was another Captain America. His name was Isaiah Bradley, and his story is told in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. But basically, long story short, after Captain America disappeared on ice, or disappeared in that crash in the ice, before they found his body and brought him back to life 70 years later or whatever it was, 40? I don't fucking remember. Anyways, there was another Captain America, Isaiah Bradley. He was a black man that they gave the super soldier serum to, and basically when a mission, if I remember correctly, something went wrong and he had to take the fall for it. They swept him under the rug and basically punished him for doing what they told him to do, but they needed a scapegoat so they wouldn't look bad. And so he took the fall and ended up going to prison and all kinds of shit. The government betrayed him. Well, is what happened. It's a really big deal when they tell the story in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because it's supposed to be about just how the system treats black people in general. It was a very on the nose allegory. And that's good, because we don't always need subtlety, because sometimes subtlety goes over the heads of the people who need to learn something from it. So every once in a while, being loud and proud with your message is preferable, so that the dum-dums who wouldn't get it otherwise, it actually sinks in. So anywho, Isaiah Bradley is in this movie as former Captain America. And I don't think I can really get into what happens surrounding his character without doing spoilers, so we'll hold off on that. But all I can say is, have you ever seen The Manchurian Candidate? If you have, then I think you know where I'm going with this. If you haven't, then bear with me, and I'll explain it in the spoilers if you don't mind having this spoiled for you. But if you are listening, if you're planning on listening to the spoilers, it either means A, you don't care if I spoil this movie for you, because either you don't plan on watching it, or you do, but you don't care if it's spoiled, or B, you've already seen it. So, and if it's the latter, then you already know what I'm talking about, But for those of you who do know, I will say that was very Manchurian Candidate of them, the way that they pulled that off. Very smart. Yeah, there's another thing I can't get into as well. in detail yet, but what I will say is that this movie introduces a new mineral resource. A new, okay, so you know how they have vibranium and they make a lot of shit out of vibranium, like the shield and Black Panther's suit and all that. They get it from Wakanda. It's a resource they can mine, like we mine gold and silver. There is something else that is now part of the MCU that is like vibranium and even ends in an eum in the same way, but is not vibranium. But it is very important, and fans of X-Men will be familiar with it. And that was introduced in this movie, and it is a big deal. Especially considering the movie we got last year. So, and, I want to say, what else can I hint at without directly spoiling here? I will. Yeah, okay. There is something that Thunderbolt Ross asks Sam to do that may surprise you because it's kind of out of character for him considering his agenda in the previous movies, if that makes any sense. But it does mean that we may see the return of, you know, a group that's kind of a big deal. And considering that we have 2 movies coming out in the next couple of years with the name of this group in the title of them, it's not too hard to put 2 and 2 together. But again, I will wait until the spoiler section to get into full details about that. But let's just say that we may see the return of a particular group of heroes whose job it is to avenge people, if you will. So anyways, don't take that to heart, though. I'm not saying that old cast members are going to come back. What I'm saying is that a certain group is going to be reborn with new members and a new leader at their helm. And that new leader being the current Captain America, just like it was before. So, with all that being said, well, is there anything else I can say? Harrison Ford's acting is really good in this. Sam Wilson's acting is really good in this. But did you expect any different? They're both great. Not Sam Wilson. Anthony Mackie. Sam Wilson is the character's name. Anthony Mackie is really good. Harrison Ford is really good. Did you expect any different? Oh, yeah, there's a character in this movie that there's a character in this movie that is basically another Black Widow. And I don't mean that in like, oh, she's just like Black Widow. No, she is a Black Widow. Remember that Black Widow herself, Natasha, wasn't the only Black Widow. Her younger sister, Yelena, who's now part of the MCU, is also a Black Widow. And this girl that they introduced in this movie, I think her name was Ruth. Yeah, Ruth. She's also a Black Widow. As we saw in the movie Black Widow, they all were little girls that were kidnapped when they were younger and basically turned into Russian sleeper agents through training in a place called the Red Room. So, this woman, Ruth, is a former Black Widow, but she's now the president's personal security detail. But anyways, might as well give a rating. I think I've said everything I can, spoiler free. 8 out of 10. That's where I'm going to sit on this. 8 out of 10 is what I'm going to give it. It is and just to be clear, let me explain how my rating scale works, because some people don't seem to understand numbers and percentages very well. I see the internet all the time treat 7s and 8s like they're bad scores, and they're not. That's fucking stupid. I rate on a 10 scale, and it's evenly split. Everything 6 and above is good. Everything 5 and below is bad. From there, it's just a scale of how good and how bad, okay? So, anyways, though, I continue to digress, but I have a little more time when it's just me talking, you know, and I don't have to share the floor. So, like I said, 8 out of 10 is my rating for the new Captain America. I really liked it. I didn't love it, but I liked it. You know, is it in my top 10 MCU movies of all time? I would have to think about that, but probably not. Is it in my top 20? Definitely. So maybe top 15. But it's definitely up there. You know, I would put it on the same level as like Iron Man 3, or was 3 or 2 the one everyone hated? I can never remember. I think people hated 2 but liked 3. I think. I don't know. I can't remember to be honest with you. But I would, I would put it up there with just like your regular action Marvel movies, like I said, the ones from the earlier phases. You know, the ones that were trying to be more grounded and realistic and less cosmic, I guess you could say. You know, there's no space stuff here, there's no magic here. It's all science and action in this movie. So, just like classic Marvel. So, like I said, 8 out of 10. Now, this is the part where I transition into spoilers. You have been warned.
You and I haven't always agreed on how much latitude enhanced individuals deserve. But what you've accomplished has given me reason to reconsider. Which is why I want you, Captain America, to help me rebuild the Avengers.
The Avengers?
Yes, sir.
All right, here we are at the spoilers section of the show. You have been warned for the final time. 3, 2, 1, boom. All right, down to brass tacks. First of all, some of the things that I was hinting at. First of all, the Avengers. Thaddeus Ross told Captain America, Sam Wilson, Captain America, because I know every time I say Captain America, some of you are going to picture Steve Rogers. And that man is retired. He is not the captain anymore. Sam Wilson is. And Sam Wilson is no longer the Falcon. His sidekick, Juarez, is. So, anyways. So, the current Captain America, Thaddeus Ross, tells him that he wants him to restart the Avengers and would have him at the helm. I already have my suspicions about which way that's going to go. The end of this movie basically confirms that, yes, he is going to restart the Avengers, and the new Falcon will be a part of it. I think here's my theory about who he's going to recruit for the new Avengers. I think it's going to be Shang-Chi. I think it's going to be either either Smart Hulk or She-Hulk. I'm not sure. I'm thinking it probably won't be Winter Soldier because he is going to be part of the Thunderbolts. And I think the Thunderbolts are going to become the Dark Avengers eventually. So that's a thing. I also think that Star-Lord is going to be part of the Avengers because he went back to Earth at the end of Guardians 3, and it said he will return. So, and remember, there's 2 Avengers movies coming up, Doomsday and Secret Wars. And Secret Wars is a big deal because that's the multiverse. That's when the multiverse is going to come to a head right there. But Doomsday is going to bring in Doctor Doom, and that's a pretty big deal too. So, Star-Lord is going to have to be there for one of those. All these characters I mentioned, like, eventually, all these movies, TV shows that they've been building up to, just like they did with Infinity War and Endgame, when Secret Wars rolls around, they're going to have to bring all these new characters back for one big, huge crossover fight. And it's not only going to be the characters that they've introduced in our universe, but it's going to be characters that they've introduced in other universes, too, through other means that we've seen. Other multiversal characters. So that's going to be wild. But anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself. So, that's the big thing. The Avengers are coming back. Obviously, it's one of the big things. The other thing, the mineral that I mentioned, adamantium, the stuff that Wolverine's bones and claws are made out of. Adamantium has been introduced into the sacred timeline of the MCU. The sacred timeline being the main one we've been following since Iron Man. The TVA are the ones who call it the sacred timeline, not, so don't give me any shit for that. That's their name. That's their official canonical name for the main universe. So yeah. So adamantium is in the sacred timeline now, and they're mining it from a dead celestial from Eternals. The dead celestial sticking out of the Indian Ocean, uh, turns out, is made of adamantium, and they're mining it from it. Or they can mine adamantium from it. Something along those lines. And this almost leads to World War III, or at least a second Pearl Harbor, because Jesus Christ. There's basically Thaddeus Ross and the president of Japan are being played against each other by the real villain of this movie, and it leads to them having a naval standoff in the middle of the ocean next to this giant dead celestial statue, and they basically go after each other. But remember how I mentioned the whole Manchurian Candidate thing earlier? Well, basically, Sam and Juarez get invited to the White House as special guests because of a successful mission they did. And Isaiah Bradley, Sam brings him with him as a guest of honor. And basically, the real villain of this movie, and we'll get to who that is in a second, the real villain of this movie sends a signal to certain people's phones, right? And it flashes these like lights at them. And basically what it does is it triggers like a brainwashing thing in their mind. I don't know exactly all the science and yada yada shit behind it, but basically it turns them into like Russian sleeper agents, essentially. Like it brainwashes them. It mind controls them, basically. It controls their mind and gets them to do the bidding of who sent the signal. And the signal turns out to be sent by a villain known in the comics as the Leader, a green guy with a big head because he's super smart. But who he is in this movie is still the Leader, but it's a returning character from the original Hulk movie from 16 years ago, the Edward Norton one. Tim Blake Nelson played a character in that movie called Silas something. Samuel Stearns, that's his name. Jesus Christ. He plays a character named Samuel Stearns in the Hulk, and he's back in this movie. So he accidentally got infused with some of Bruce Banner's blood, but instead of his, Bruce Banner's gamma poisoned blood, but since he didn't get a direct hit of gamma radiation, instead of becoming super strong, he became super smart. He got all of Bruce's brains, but none of the Hulk's strength. But what he did get was the green skin color permanently and a big old brain bulging out of his head. It's very gross to look at. So Samuel Stearns is still alive, and they finally tie up this loose end from 16 years ago, and he's the villain of this movie. And basically, after the events of that movie, they needed someone to take the fall for everything that happened with the Hulk and the Abomination. So Samuel Stearns is the one who took that fall. And they'd been keeping him imprisoned in this secret government base for 16 years. And eventually, he decided... Eventually, he was able to work some things out with Ross. Because, turns out, this is the real kicker... Thunderbolt Thaddeus Ross has a heart condition that's killing him. Knowing that Samuel Stearns is super smart, he goes to him and asks him for a way to help him, not die. Because his daughter, Betty, is still not talking to him after everything that happened with Bruce way back then. And everything that he's done since, trying to basically persecute the Avengers and all that shit with the raft and all that. So he goes to Samuel Stearns, and Samuel Stearns, being the smart vengeance fucker that he is, basically he's like, all right, give me a lab, I got you, I'll figure this out. And of course, being desperate, Thaddeus gives him a lab and everything, and he ends up making these pills that he gives him that help keep him alive. But what he doesn't know is that these pills are infused with gamma radiation. And And so he uses those pills as a way to manipulate Ross. Those pills are slowly turning Ross into a Hulk. And he uses this to his advantage at the end of the movie as he teases and tortures him and basically convinces him to finally let loose and roar, Hulk smash, and all that, except he's the Red Hulk. Man, I do hope at some point we get to see Red Hulk and regular Hulk go up against each other. That would be crazy. But yeah, so Samuel Stearns, so the leader in Red Hulk, which are both Hulk villains, by the way, in a Captain America movie. There's not a single actual Captain America villain in this movie. 2 Hulk villains, though, and Sidewinder, who, the Serpent Society, I'm not sure which comics they appeared most in. I want to say they are Captain America villains, though. That sounds about right. So the Serpent Society in the comics are Captain America villains because they have connections to Hydra. Well, duh. Of course they do. That makes sense. That actually makes a lot of sense. So yeah, the Serpent Society. So Sidewinder is a Captain America villain, but he, like I said, he wasn't in much of the movie. He gets incapacitated very soon, very early on, and then Sam goes to him later for information about Samuel Stearns, and he talks to him about it. So, and that's basically where that begins and ends. But basically, so they're at the White House, and Isaiah and a bunch of political officials, different, high-ranking people, all get activated, quote-unquote, with the flashing lights on their phones, and they try to kill the president. And it becomes a whole thing, and Isaiah ends up, going to prison again and everything, and Sam is like, I can't let you rot in here. He's like, I know you're innocent. I know you, because he could tell the moment that they caught up to him, it was like something clicked in his mind and he was back to normal. And from his perspective, 1 minute he's sitting there in the thing listening to the speech. The next minute he's outside being arrested, and he doesn't remember anything that happened in between that. So Sam knows something's fishy about this, and he starts looking into it, and that's eventually what leads him to Samuel and everything that's going on there. Ruth at first is like just wants to persecute Isaiah. She doesn't believe that he's innocent, but she eventually starts to come around once she sees the truth of what's happening too. And then she joins their side and becomes, like I said, she's a former Black Widow, so it's all a good fight. But yeah, that's really the big thing, is that Samuel Stearns is in this, and he's the main villain, and he's controlling everything, puppeteering it all behind the scenes. The Red Hulk is all his doing, everything, all this is his doing. He turns America and Japan against each other and almost starts World War III. All of this over some adamantium, by the way, which, that shit's, you've seen Wolverine, you know how good that shit is. So that ends up becoming basically the main thing. But then there's a scene during the fight over the ocean where Juarez almost dies, and he's fine, he survives, obviously, he's going to be the new Falcon, but Sam is in the hospital talking to him, and Bucky shows up for a little cameo, and he is, turns out, going to be a congressman of some kind. Bucky's going into politics for some reason. And how that's going to tie into Thunderbolts, I don't know. I can't tell if that movie's meant to take place, like, before or after, or, where it fits in the timeline exactly. But because I don't really see a congressman running around with a bunch of former villains causing chaos throughout the city. But we'll see what happens there. But anyways, yeah, so Bucky's getting into politics now. I don't know what that's all about, but, we'll see where that goes. What's crazy, though? Well, he's going to be... Okay, so, this is one of the few MCU movies that doesn't take place in New York. Most of it takes place in Washington. So, he kind of... he made some moves. They're not in New York anymore. So there's that. New York has its own political situation going on now. Watch Daredevil to figure that out. Anyways, yeah, so overall, this movie did do a lot to move the needle forward for the whole MCU, if you ask me. And I think it's worth watching if you care about the overall progress of everything. I can't really, there's not really too much to spoil here that I didn't already cover overall. It's a pretty paint by numbers movie for the most part, with maybe like one or two surprises here and there, but it's still a very, very generic, formulaic MCU movie, just with much better fight scenes than usual. Not bad, not great, but good, enjoyable, a solid romp, a fun movie. If you like fun, it's a fun movie overall. So I think I think that's pretty much where I'm gonna leave it off. I honestly can't think of anything else I wanted to say about this at the moment. I there's not really a whole lot much more to say, honestly. They didn't take any huge leaps. I will mention the credit scene. There is one, and it's at the very, 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 very end of the credits. Not mid-credit, very, very, very end. And Sam goes to visit or Stearns in the raft. He's locked away in the raft at the end of the movie. And he warns him. He says, "I've seen all the possible outcomes. They're coming." He's like, "You think you heroes, you protect this world. You think you're the only ones and this is the only world, but it's not. There are more and they're coming, and pretty soon you're going to have to protect yourselves from all the worlds," or something like that. It basically a hint towards Secret Wars is what it was. They're building up to the big shit coming again. So I'm excited to see where that goes eventually. And yeah, they do eventually put Thaddeus Thunderbolt Ross in the raft as well, because he actually, at the end of the movie, he steps down from being president and locks himself away in the raft because he realizes how dangerous he is as a Hulk. And Liv Tyler does make a brief cameo where she comes to visit him. I kind of wish, though, that this would have happened when he was still the Hulk, and it was how he calmed down. But at the same time, the fact that I was expecting that means that maybe that shouldn't have happened, because that would have been very predictable and therefore kind of cliche. But basically, though, he remembers taking walks with her through the cherry blossom gardens, right? So that's where Sam leads him to have their fight. And he damn near kills him, if I'm being honest. Sam Wilson easily could have died in this fight because, again, let me remind you, he is not a super soldier. There is no serum in him. He's just a man with a shield and these wings. And once he loses the shield and the wings, he's basically useless. And it really stands out in this fight because he came very close. He came within an inch of his life going up against a Hulk. And it's funny as hell because Bucky gives him this whole big speech about how, because when he feels bad about not being able to protect Juarez and how Juarez almost died, he tells Bucky that he thinks he should have taken that super soldier serum. And Bucky's like, "Nah, you don't need it, man. You've got heart. You're a real hero in your heart, in your soul." He's like, "Steve had the serum and he still failed sometimes." Shit like that. And then cut to this fight later, and Sam is getting his ass kicked, like absolutely destroyed, right? And he's hanging on broken bones, barely holding on. He's like, ugh. He's like, "Bucky was full of shit. I should have taken that serum." That was a genuinely funny line. And it's funny because early in the movie, when Sam is infiltrating he's doing like a mission for the government and he's infiltrating this warehouse full of enemies, there's one big brutish hulking guy that kind of gets the upper hand on the fight with him until he finally gets Sam does eventually turn it around on him, but the guy gets a good one on him at first. He like throws him to the ground really hard, and he's like he's like, "Ooh, I heard your rib break. Do you need a minute?" And Sam's like, "Nah, I'm good," as he gets up. And eventually he gets the upper hand on the guy and ends up breaking his arm, or fracturing it at least. And he's like, "Do you need a minute?" It like turns it back on him. It's kind of funny. But now that I think about it, his mini fight with this big muscly guy was actually kind of a book ending to his fight with the Hulk at the end of the movie. He had this fight with this big guy at the beginning of the movie, and you see how he struggles in this fight with just a really strong human guy, and he struggles with that. So it was almost kind of like a foreshadowing to show you that he was definitely going to struggle in his fight with the Red Hulk, Like that was good. Now that that kind of realization just hit me, in hindsight. And I think that was actually really clever foreshadowing, if I'm being honest. But yeah, eventually, though, what gets the Red Hulk to calm down and turn back into Thaddeus Ross is the goddamn cherry blossoms. I'm not kidding. It's the trees are all destroyed and the blossoms the petals are flying everywhere. One of them falls into his hand and it makes him think of his daughter, and he finally calms down. And honestly, having his daughter actually show up and be the one to calm him down would have been just as fucking effective and equally as cliche. So, they literally, it's the same fucking thing, quite frankly. But, it was the end of the movie and they needed to wrap shit up. So they just kind of like, you know what, we'll do the thing. just get us to the finish here, Like I said, it's an 8 out of 10. I didn't say 9. I didn't say 10. I said 8. 8 insinuates there are some flaws, but it's good. So anyways, I'm going to leave it there. I don't think there's anything else I can say. Honestly, did about a half hour of non-spoilers, about a half hour of spoilers, and yeah. So yeah. See this movie when it hits Disney Plus, please. If you care about the overall MCU story in general, this one has some important shit that I think is going to come back into play later during the Avengers movies. The Adamantium, the Dead Celestial, the rebirth of the Avengers, the Red Hulk. I think all that shit's important. So make sure you give this one a watch. Not only that, it's just genuinely fun. And for my progressive friends out there, and especially my co-hosts, because I know y'all are listening to this eventually, watch it just to spite the racists, honestly. Just to be an activist. Just watch it to do that. Because there are so many angry rednecks that are mad that Captain America's black now. Watching this movie and supporting it is sticking the finger to the racist assholes. So, there you go. There's your motivation to watch it. Anyways, that's it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below if you're on YouTube about what you thought of this movie, and smash the like button if you enjoyed it, or you can send me an email at podcastoversoul@gmail.com. Or you can find me on Twitter at Oversoul53 as well. And until next time, we'll see you in the next episode. Bye-bye for now.
Not that hard. I heard your rib go. You need a minute?
Nope. Let's get this over with. I got shit to do today.